If you're below 1500 and you love playing online blitz, then this is probably the best chess opening for you to crush your opponents. I'm Grandmaster Igor Smirnov and I'm talking about the Evans Gambit. Here you sacrifice a pawn for the sake of quick development and attack. This is a very good deal for online blitz. Now here you attack the bishop. If it goes back, you can push the pawn forward and drive away the knight. Therefore, in most cases, they are going to capture it. Then you play pawn c3, gaining one more tempo to attack the bishop. And at this point, we have good news and great news. So good news is bishop a5, which is the main move, which pins this pawn in the future, is actually leading to a very nice variation. And in most cases, you're going to have an almost forcing win here. Now, the great news is in most cases, your opponents are going to retreat the bishop back to c5, where it's sent it, which is even worse for black because it now just walks right into the other attacking move of yours, pawn to d4. Anyways, let's begin with bishop a5. It's considered the main move because now as you go pawn d4, your usual attacking move to grab the center and attack this pawn, after they capture it, now you cannot recapture because your pawn is pinned. And that was the point of keeping the bishop right here on a5. Nevertheless, you simply castle away from this pin. There is no pin anymore, and therefore now you actually want to grab this pawn and build a beautiful pawn center. As they take this pawn on c3, whoopee-doopie, this is already a losing error. And almost a losing error, because now you've got queen b3, threatening this pawn on f7. By the way, this battery is something you really got to remember. The Evans Gambit is one of the most usual ways for you to put pressure and sometimes even a winning attack against your opponent. Now, they got to defend it somehow. What can they do? They can't do it with the bishop from here, because if they move the knight out, you can trade it off. They'll usually defend their pawn by the queen, which is a standard move, but now you bring the knight out and you keep attacking. This time, you threaten to jump forward, hitting this queen right on the next move. So what do? They trade off, thinking that it will simplify their life in the future, but it's not going to do so. In reality, they're only trading off their only developed piece, and so now it's even easier for you to continue your attack. You play queen takes c3 from here. You threaten this pawn on g7 and indirectly the rook. They go knight f6, thinking, okay, I'm about to castle kingside right on the next turn, but you say not so fast and play bishop a3, which is another super common way for you to develop your attack. This time you're hitting the queen, and there's also a nice side benefit. If the queen moves away, notice that our bishop still controls this square, making it impossible for them to castle. That is a really cool idea in general, in many variations of the Evans Gambit. Now, in most cases, of course, they're not going to move the queen away. They're going to play d6, still hoping to castle right on the next turn. But this time, you break open the center with the pawn to e5. Their king and even the queen are centralized, so you just want to remove this pawn from the e-file so that you can put the rook right here and go for the kill. Now, what can they do? They can't take it with a pawn because it's still pinned. All right. If instead they take it with a knight, then after the trade, and after the one more trade, now you bring the rook into play and you use another pin. This time the queen is pinned down to the king and can't move. If they try to cover and counterattack, then you can sacrifice the rook because you have a ton of spare rooks, and then you bring the other one. And you basically repeat the cycle once again. It's the same pin, but this time black is totally defenseless. If they take on e1, then you are now up a piece and the black king is in check. You keep attacking, and on the next turn, like if you wish, there is even actually the forcing win all the way till the end is queen a5, threatening this pawn from here, this checkmate, and as they play b6, this queen d5 is a double attack where you literally win the game. Now queen takes f7 is coming, or else queen takes a8. So it's really hard or virtually impossible to mess up from here. You're going to win the game. Back to the main line, as they capture the pawn, you attack the bishop and then strike in the center. They recapture. You cannot recapture back because of this pin, so you castle away. And now we know that accepting this pawn sacrifice is actually very natural, but also very bad for black. They're just falling too much behind in development, which makes it easy for you to continue your attack. Now, what else can they play instead of this capture? Very often they feel reluctant to develop the knight because you can always push the pawn forward and chase it away. Black needs to know a lot how to handle here, and this is tough. So instead they sometimes play knight to e7 because it feels like a much safer alternative, and they're still hoping to castle. And you say, okay, if you want to castle, go ahead. You play knight g5. This time it's double attack to this pawn, and you encourage them indeed to castle. Now I think, okay, cool, I'm castling, I'm safe. But that is the furthest from the truth, because now after queen h5, you just win the game. You totally overload them with threats, the main one being queen takes h7, mate in 1. They have to stop it, but now knight takes f7 hits the queen. What can they do? well, they can either give up the rook or move the queen out of this danger, but now this leads to a pretty funny variation with one double check right here from a knight and bishop. The king moves, then there's one more double check, this time from the knight and queen, and after the king moves, that is a checkmate. Instead, it is better for your opponent to give up the rook at this point, but now you still keep coming with attacking moves. The king needs to move because of the check. Also, you threaten bishop takes h6 to totally open up the position around their king. If the king moves here, trying to watch over your bishop, then the bishop slides back, vacating the square for your queen on the next turn, coming with this scholar's checkmate, so to say. If they try to counter it with a queen, then there are different ways for you to win the game here. The most spectacular being queen takes h6. Threatening checkmating one and sacrificing the queen along the way. And if the queen is taken, then you just develop your bishop. The second move, which is actually the most popular here in the position, is for black to retreat the bishop back to c5. This is wrong because it allows you to play d4 and to gain one more tempo, hitting the very same bishop. Now, it also attacks this pawn in the center, they're gonna take it, and now normally white would be expected to recapture, and this is a good move, but there is an even better one, alright? So what is the issue with just recapturing and attacking the bishop? Well, if the bishop drops somewhere back, that would be really ideal. In this case, not only you grab the center, you can also keep marching forward and attacking this time this other knight on c6, and life's great. But the problem is the bishop can come forward with this check. And the position is still very good for white, but it's not totally winning. Therefore, instead, what I recommend is instead of recapturing this pawn, just castle. This also sets a really nice trap. What is the trap? Now they see that you're going to capture this pawn, attack their bishop, maybe push this pawn forward, attack this knight, all that good stuff is coming. And they realize that the easiest solution for them is to take this pawn on c3, and yet, quite like in the previous operation with the bishop standing on a5 right here, with the bishop on c5, it is still wrong, but just the reason is different. This time you've got another common tactic here, it's bishop takes f7 check, the king needs to recapture, and now queen to d5. So this time we capitalize on the fact that the bishop is undefended. If we compare it with the previous line where the bishop was on a5, it was guarded by the black knight. But when the bishop is right here, it is undefended, which allows you to unleash this little combo, win the pawn on f7, and totally expose their king. They'll drop the king back, and now you could take the bishop straight away, but it's even better to first play this in-between check. We're inducing them to play g6, which is an additional weakness. Now queen takes c5, and the king is exposed. Right? There are no pawns around it. Also, it moved back and forth, meaning it cannot castle in this game. And after any move of black, and let's say queen takes c3, you can also notice that there are a whole lot of all these weaknesses around dark squares in their position, which is really bad for them. Now, what can they do? If they just develop the knight, then, there are different ways to attack these dark squares. Something like bishop h6 might be the move. Also controlling all these squares, threatening bishop g7 with this double attack, and then just knight d2, rook e1, e5, open up the e-file, and checkmate him. So something like this. Of course, your opponent can play different moves, but in general, that's how you win. Now, if instead black plays queen f6, offering the trade of queens, then you can actually accept it, which is a funny thing, because normally it is supposed to be equalizing. If someone is defending, they're able to trade off queens, that neutralizes your attack. But in this case, you can actually double down on the same diagonal. And now with this bishop, you reinforce the pressure, and after the trade, all of a sudden this rook in the corner is trapped. Well, to be precise, in order not to lose the rook, black would need to give up the knight right here, but still, you're up a piece in an endgame, so hopefully you can win the game from here. I know that some of you guys write me in comments that, Igor, you say that it's a totally winning position, but there is still a lot of play from here on. Like, of course, it is supposed to be winning for white, but it's not that simple, right? It's a different subject. If you want to know how to play more flawless games where you're more consistent and you actually win winning positions, I've got a free masterclass about this. I'll drop a link below. You can check it out later. All right, so in this position, we know that black cannot, or rather should not, take this pawn because of this bishop takes f7 sacrifice, followed by queen to d5. What can black play instead? Sometimes they play knight f6, and I'm going to share with you like a really quick and cool game played by Zhigalko. He's not very famous in general, but he's one of the best blitz players. And here he actually plays Evans Gambit a lot, which once again just reinforces the fact that it's a great opening for blitz. And this game illustrates a lot of common attacking patterns in the Evans Gambit. So first you recapture attacking the bishop. The bishop drops back, and now there are a number of ways for you to continue your attack. Some of the standard ways would be pushing one of these two pawns forward to attack these knights, and this is a great idea. In the game, white played bishop a3, which is another common idea, just restricting the king so that it can't castle. Black realized that, well, there is too much for them to handle, not only their king is centralized, but also white is still threatening to push one of these central pawns forward and attack knights. They decided to gain some space in the center with this d5 strike, and after the trade, white played a pretty cool move. He just developed a knight, knight c3, which is also a knight sacrifice. And initially it's like, hey, what's the point? Is it just a blunder? White is blundering a knight and black is attacking the queen? Not really, white keeps playing calmly rook e1 check. Notice that our bishop is still controlling this square. The king cannot retreat there, therefore black needs to somehow guard it. They cannot also cover with the knight because of too much pressure against it. So instead black played bishop e6, makes sense, but now queen to b3. White is just playing the style of Paul Morphy back in the day, where you just quickly develop pieces and go for the decisive attack. Now the bishop is pinned right by the rook. White is putting a ton of pressure right there. Black still cannot castle. This knight on c3 is attacked. There is literally way too many threats. But black played knight a5 trying to counter-strike. And in the game, white just captured this knight and won the game pretty easily after that, but he missed a really spectacular way to win the game. Bishop takes e6, sacrificing the queen and utilizing the fact that the king is still centralized with this bishop h3, absolutely mind-boggling geometry of the chess game, where we're killing it with all these snipers. Notice that white does not have any piece closer to black's territory. Like, the furthest pieces white has are on the third rank, and yet it is almost a checkmate because of all these cool snipers controlling all these diagonals. So black literally has to give up the queen, but even then, it doesn't really help because white keeps attacking. Rook takes e7 check because of this bishop. This bishop still remains to be very active. If the king tries to hide right here, you could just take a knight and win the game. Rook e1 is even stronger. Now this knight is still attacked. If the knight goes somewhere, let's say, there's also this pretty cool double checkmate. Sounds almost like a tongue twister. Now let me show you another very interesting game where the Evans Gambit was used against the women's world chess champion Kosteniuk. It was a blitz game, and now bishop takes b4, pawn c3, hitting the bishop. She plays the correct move bishop a5, so that after d4, attacking the center, black recaptures, and this pawn is pinned. But as we know, we're simply going to castle, renewing this threat. Now, pawn takes c3, as you know, is wrong because of this attack. Now, maybe you don't remember that, but hopefully after this video, at least you know all these common attacking patterns so that even if you forget the exact sequence of moves, you can still utilize one of these attacking ideas. Anyways, in the game, black played pawn d3. I guess just trying to get rid of the main lines and get rid of the danger. And I noticed that this is a very common pattern because everybody is like too lazy, even professional players, to actually study the right theory and how to handle the Evans Gambit because it's not that common. And therefore, even strong players, even grandmasters, they just try to use some rare sideline and they hope that it will get white out of their prep and black will be able to, sneakily get out of the opening. But it's not simple, because in the Evans Gambit, you still utilize all the same attacking ideas. And if your opponent plays something unusual, ridiculous, no problem, you keep attacking. So here white played bishop a3, one of those attacking patterns, controlling the king so that it can't castle. Black continued with knight to e7, blocking the diagonal and getting ready to castle. But the downside of this move is that it allows another attacking idea of white, knight g5, with a double attack to this pawn. And now black can't really castle. She didn't in the game, because if black castles, it allows queen h5. Remember, we saw this idea in one of the previous variations. So the thing is, with the knight on e7, this whole attack works out for white and wins the game. If the knight were on f6, this move queen h5 would not be possible because the knight would simply capture it. But with the knight on e7, it goes flawlessly. White just attacks everything right here and wins the game. Black knew it, and therefore in the game, after white jumped forward with the knight attacking this pawn, black played knight e5, which both defends the knight and counters white's bishop, while white continued, nevertheless, with the same idea, queen h5, adding one more attacker. Black played g6, hoping to get rid of the queen, but now the queen goes inside with queen to h6. And the main threat right here is queen to g7, threatening rook, and adding one more attack to this pawn on f7, which actually makes it really challenging for black to find the right defensive move. And after some thinking, black played knight to g8, probably thinking that it's still a very complex position because the white queen is attacked by the knight. This knight is going to be hanging, this bishop on c4 is hanging, and it's all good, but it blunders mating 1, queen f8. Black just overlooked the fact that there is still this bishop from a3. You see that even for the world champion, it's not easy to handle the Evans Gambit. So far we talked about a little unusual chess opening, which is still very effective, and if you want to know 2 simple rules which are unknown about the middle game, check out this video. It's really simple and I guarantee that it will show you another perspective on how to level up your chess.